Good morning, all 101 Patriots. Welcome to the 349th consecutive Friday meeting of the East Valley Red Friday Patriots. We sincerely appreciate you folks rising early this morning to join us in our demonstration of support for America's deployed service members. So thank you very much for your support. Only a few years ago, while performing at a Washington National Cathedral, the United States Air Force Orchestra and singing sergeants recorded their rendition of a song, One Voice. The performance was a special presentation featuring the orchestra, the Air Force strings, and various community participants. When we speak of one voice, we typically represent an anthem of unity, hope, and the transformative power of individuals coming together to create change. One voice often highlights a theme of peace, overcoming adversity, and spiritual connection. One voice focuses on joining voices to make the world a better place. One voice is a call for unity, emphasizing that despite world divisions, people are connected and can create positive change by coming together. The core message within this song is that individual voices, when joined together, possess the power to overcome obstacles, foster peace, and promote healing. With all the turmoil currently in place around the world today, wouldn't it be astonishing for people from all nations to finally come together and demonstrate unity in their desire for world peace? Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our great flag and our great nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask Colonel Ted Confederate to come forward and introduce our guest speaker for this morning. Ted?
Lance and Terry Dresman, raise your hands, please. Thank you. Lance and Terry have been fixtures here at our Red Friday assemblies for quite some time now. And we thank both of you for your loyal support. So here a little while back, following one of our Red Friday assemblies, Lance shared a little information with Dick Nations about his son. His son's name is Russell. Lance told Dick that Russell was a retired United States Air Force officer who had a rather extensive career in Air Force space, cyber, and signal intelligence, and that following his military career, Russell had remained employed in that field. In fact, Lance suggested that Dick reach out to Russell to determine if he might share a little information with us about his career and what it entailed. Well, soon after that conversation with Lance, Dick did just that. He spoke with Russell and requested that he pack a bag and travel from Colorado Springs, Colorado, to join us for Red Friday and share with us as much intel as possible about his experience in this most interesting and globally challenging field. Without hesitation, Russell agreed to come, and this morning I had the distinct pleasure of introducing Lieutenant Colonel Russell Dresman, United States Air Force retired. Russell is originally from Grinnell, Iowa, located about 50 miles due east of Des Moines. He received his commission in 1999 as a graduate of Officer Training School. He has over 20 years of Air Force intelligence experience in national space intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance signals intelligence, cyberspace operations, geospatial intelligence, as well as support for special operations forces. He is a graduate of the National Security Agency's Junior Officer Cryptologic Career Program, which is a highly selective 3-year joint program designed to prepare military officers for future intelligence and cryptologic leadership. As you are aware, cryptology is focused on creating and breaking digital codes. Colonel Dressman's career as an intelligence officer spanned the strategic, tactical, and operational levels of warfare throughout the Pacific, Central, European, and homeland theaters, including deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and across the Pacific. Colonel Dressman retired from the Air Force in 2019 while serving with the North American Air to Space Command and the U.S. Northern Command J2. J2 refers to the intelligence directorate within a joint staff organization, such as the Joint Staff at the Pentagon or a combatant command. J2 is responsible for providing comprehensive, all-source intelligence, crisis support, and threat analysis to commanders to enable informed decision-making and operational planning. Colonel Dressman's presentation will highlight his military assignments and will focus on the current threats to America's space assets. Russell's formal education is quite extensive. In 1977, as a student of the University of Northern Iowa, he earned a Bachelor of Arts in Management, Business Administration, a Bachelor of Arts in Russian, and a certificate in International Business. In 2004, he earned a Master of Science in Management Information Systems from Bowie State University, Maryland. And in 2006, he earned a Master of Science in Information and Information and Telecommunication Systems for Business from Johns Hopkins University in Maryland. Colonel Dressman is the recipient of numerous military decorations, awards, and citations to include the Bronze Star, Defense Meritorious Service Medal with 1 oak leaf cluster, Meritorious Service Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, Joint Service Commendation Medal with 1 oak leaf cluster, Air Force Commendation Medal, and both the Afghan and Iraq campaign medals. Following his military retirement, Colonel Dressman served for 6 years as a department head, course director, contract site lead, and educator at the National Security Space Institute in support of the U.S. Space Force and U.S. Space Command at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Colonel Dressman and his wife Diane currently reside in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Diane is also a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, having retired as a major. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant Colonel retired Russell Dressman.
Again, thank you for everyone for what you do, what you're here, what you stand up for, wearing the red. It's more appreciated. I go a different angle a lot of times, and I really like to highlight and thank the spouses. Because a lot of times, your military members, you signed up for stupid stuff. But as a spouse member, you didn't sign up for that. And you have to deal with some of the aftermaths of some of the deployments and some of the other aspects and being gone at different things. So I always like to really thank the spouses. Now, one thing I laugh at is I don't do the hua, but because, I'm Air Force. But I still have a back that works, and I still have knees that work. So I'm okay with that, I guess. Right? I know so many people. Yeah, I like that. All right, so really a lot of it is talk here today. Now a little bit of my background and what's going on for mission, but a lot of it was to focus on Space Force. Because when we're talking with Dick, over the last 6 years I've been teaching, and there's not a lot of people that really understand what the Space Force is and what it is and why we have it. It's either a bad joke on a Netflix show or, you see memes with Marines in space, even though someday I really do want to see Marines in space with guns. We'll see, because that would be really fun to go. In this picture right here, I usually like to start off. So there's this thing that's called NATO Air Training Command, Afghanistan. So I was an advisor for the Afghan Air Force, a senior advisor, to build up their intelligence capabilities in the Afghan Air Force. Now, there's a patch on there, and it said, I hope you make it. So we get cards when we're deployed a lot of times. And one little kid out in Louisiana, actually Arkansas, decided he'd just write a card, and all he wrote on that card when we got it was, I hope you make it. And where we were at, where I was teaching at, what I was doing, I was working with the Afghan Air Force. It happened to be, just a couple years prior, the largest insider attack. 9 members lost their lives from an insider attack at that point in time. And so our motto was, kind of hope you make it. So we adopted that motto because we thought it was funny. And then we ended up finding the kid and having a news thing and all that kind of stuff. But every time we left, we had a poster and a sign We had mugs made, we had T-shirts, all that kind of stuff, and every time we go back and hope you make it. So if I were to ever say that, hope you make it, it's out of love, not trying to be rude or anything like that, because I really do hope everyone makes it, and I appreciate what you've done. So, all right. This it's hard to see this, but there will be some terminologies I might end up using when it comes to satellites and orbits. I'll do this as simple as possible, but there's different orbits that satellites are. There's called LEO, low Earth orbit. So if I say the word LEO, it just means low, close to Earth. And if I say medium, that's a little further out. That's about 20,000 kilometers out. That's called a medium Earth orbit. And then there's geostationary, geosynchronous. That's about 35 and some change kilometers out from space. Different ranges. So they allow different things. I usually throw that up there as kind of an example before I roll in. Oh, another quick funny story from the career. This was in Iraq. When I was working in Iraq, I worked for a CIA DIA organization called the Iraq Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency organization called the Iraq Survey Group. It was there to find the WMD. It was 2003 to 2024, find the WMD and all that kind of stuff. So offline, if I ever see you, there's very interesting stories of why we thought the way we did and different things, because I would sit in on some of the interviews with some of the different corps commanders and what they had with it. But the nice thing is I was working with a lot of squirrely people, and so they gave me a cell phone when I got there, and I could use that cell phone whenever I wanted to because it had a U.S. phone number for morale type purposes. One of my favorite conversations with my mother and father is I was in the green zone downtown in the middle of Afghanistan in Baghdad. It's called the green zone area. There's a palace there. And I was talking with them because I check in with my mom and dad because I actually love them. And check in with them. Well, back in those days, you'd get mortared probably every day. Mortars would drop all the time, and you just kind of get used to it. I was up on top of the building talking to them, and all of a sudden, mortars start flying in, so I had to go into the bunkers. So my conversation to them was, oh, crap, I need to go. Bye. Bombs are flying. Click. That's it. And then you wait for the bombs to drop, and then you clear the area, make sure there's no unexploded ordnance. You do that. So it was probably 3 hours later before I had to finally give a call back and say, yeah, I'm still alive. But all they could hear was a bunch of bang, bang, bang in the background and me saying, oh, crap, bombs are flying. So as a parent, I started thinking, wow, that must have really sucked because for about 3 hours, you didn't know if your kid was alive or dead in real time. All right. I taught, so I like to leave it open as I talk. So if you do have questions about anything I have, I like to bring it up and go with it because I want to come out of here a little bit informed of what the actual Space Force was. He said a little bit in my bio, I worked a lot when it comes to space. I worked a lot with the national security, so NSA satellites, NGA satellites, so spy satellites, and next generation as to what we needed, what are requirements, what can they do, what are the capabilities, how to use them, all that kind of stuff. So I got to work a lot with the National Security Agency, with NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Organization, or agency, and we'll walk to figure out different things. And then the last 6 years, up until recently when I fully retired, I was teaching for the Space Force. I was a contractor teaching for them. And I taught there at different things for different years. Again, we worked at this area called the National Security Space Institute. It's professional education. It's set up like a college. For what they go to. So we have provosts, and we have all that kind of stuff. And then our courses are primarily designed for like the 03 to 010. So your two, all the way for your captains, Air Force captains, all the way up to 2 stars. And they're usually anywhere from a week-long to a month-long course. They're pretty intensive for what they do. When I started there, we had 3 courses. I started there in 2019, right before the stand-up of Space Command and Space Force. We had about 3 courses that we did, and when I left there were over 30 different courses. And I had my hand in, pretty much part of my hand in developing or teaching in all those. I was a senior intelligence person for it, but I also taught all the cyber as far as how cyber command and how you integrate cyber into the different forces. So a lot of fun, but the quick background for different things and just example of different courses. All right, as I roll in and understand why do you need a Space Force? That's a good argument. Do you need it? Do you not need it? The Space Force was designed and everything else because every day our satellites are tracked, targeted, jammed, cybered, everything, every day, all day long, all over the world. I mean, right now you get a lot of it in Russia and all that kind of stuff, but Iran, Russia, all different places, they're getting rammed and attacked. If you were to lose some of the satellites, especially like GPS satellites that are on, one of the key things that GPS satellites do is they give you timing. If you were to lose access to that from a space perspective, our economy goes back to about 1960s as far as technology goes, because all that timing is used. The stock market will crash. ATMs won't work. It'll affect agricultural. It'll affect pretty much every part of our lives. Even just roaming roaming around and bouncing from cell tower to cell tower, they use the timing from the GPS signal in order to do that. So the loss of those satellites would pretty much shut down electronics and everything all around the world. So it's gotten more and more significant because not only can it affect the military, but it can affect the homeland, is what I call it back here, because it'll have everyday effect and it could crash our economy. So the thinking is, oh crimey, just like as technology changing, the ultimate high ground is space. We fight now in our modern Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guard, we fight using satellite technology and other aspects for beyond the horizon type attacks. It would, our smart bombs become dumb bombs for different aspects. So without it, we need it. So the idea is if you lose that, we lose our biggest strategic advantage in how we can execute wars and concepts at different times. Again, so if you were to lose space and you lose satellites and access to that, then it's going to hit you pretty hardcore as far as what you can do for capabilities. All right. When we taught about different theories of different things. So again, understanding threats. The primary threats to satellites come from directed energy weapons like lasers, really cool stuff, all that kind of thing. It comes from electronic warfare, jamming. By the way, we get jammed all the time, but 9 times out of 10, it's actually what's called friendly jamming. We're jamming ourselves by accident. So, so it's kind of like if you're thinking, if the two gentlemen here are talking at the same time with the rest of the table, you're jamming all the voices because he can't hear anybody else because you're talking, because it's being jammed. It's friendly jamming. He's a very friendly person, right, Richard? But it's friendly jamming as it goes with it by doing it. There's also there's threats in core orbital. So when I say core orbital, it means already on orbit and different things. And then there's called direct descent ASATs, or sort of just missiles that could fire up and hit different satellites. All these technologies exist. They're being executed. They're being utilized with the idea that when you look at our adversaries or what they're trying to do, they want to take out space. So, and there are other things that have to go into it, like man-made debris that's already out there, solar activity, solar weather, because you're constantly getting beat down with different radiation. There's stuff out there. It's not just a vacuum in space. There's really bad stuff that do a lot of bad things to satellites. So with all that, it's kind of like when stand up the Air Force, because you needed to protect the people on the ground, the Army. Go Army. On target. You have to protect the Army. And in modern warfare, it's really hard. It's really hard for the Army to win without air power in that aspect. And nowadays, it's really hard without space power. So it's all that time looking into it. Now, when I talk about space weapons, there's all kinds of weapons in space, and some are dual things. You can have a little grappler, an arm type thing that can grab a satellite and yank it back. You can have lasers on satellites right now, all that kind of stuff that can shoot down other lasers. You can have jammer type things that are on them for different stuff. You could even, theoretically, it's a little bit different in the concept, but you can basically walk by and spray paint a solar panel on a satellite and effectively kills it. So there's cyber attacks, there's all kinds of things. All these are done now, every day, that are up there are real threats as it is. The funniest thing about when I as you teach space, is that you realize there is actual dogfighting in space. There's techniques, there's procedures. It's different than we consider normal dogfighting because you're moving you're moving really fast. When I say really fast, the low Earth orbits, the ones that are closest to the Earth, those are moving at about Mach 22, Mach 23 as far as the speed. So they are nearly 20, 30 times faster than if you were to fire a 9mm pistol. The velocity as it comes out, you're talking massively beyond that as far as speed of what they're doing at any given time. So at low Earth, it's moving 20-some times the speed of a bullet. So and think of how much. So the way space works, just think it's moving that fast, And think if you were firing a bullet, how much energy you would need in order to actually make that bullet, instead of going straight, actually move it back. That's how it works with energy and all that kind of stuff. That's why you also, in the movies, which I hate movies on space now, because they're all fat. You can't, if it talks about being, like we're going to park a satellite over an area, no, you can't do that. It's not, you would need, basically take that pistol, speed it up 20 times, and then be able to put like some sort of brakes on that bullet and try to push it back at the same time in order to do things like that. The energy that it would take is beyond any comprehension for what you can do. And then the further out satellites that are moving, they're moving at about 5 to 8 times the speed of a bullet that's going out. So moving really, really, really fast. You can't stand still. There's also different ways, and this is tracking stuff. So the biggest threat a lot of times is debris or other satellites. Again, that dogfighting aspects, so you need to do it. There is no there's no video feeds and everything that show exactly where a satellite, what's going on. If a satellite doesn't work or gets shot down, unless you're aware of something and have sensors that can actually see that in real time, you don't know. All of a sudden a satellite's working, and in 2 seconds it's not working. And it's like your computers at home, they break sometimes for different reasons. So you don't necessarily know if it's a threat. But we track things via radar, different things. But right now, we track over 35,000 objects that you're trying to constantly track. And that doesn't even get into the smallest objects that are out there like paint flick, where a single paint flick, if it were to run into something, would have an explosion destruction for what it is. So it's just one of those aspects of tracking it for different things. Right now, the Space Force, one of their primary missions is to track the various satellites. So it's not only satellites, but satellite debris and other concepts. So about 14,000 active satellites. There's another 3,000 dead satellites and another 14,000 just pieces of debris that are going around. And this debris is floating in space, going 30 times, 20, 30 times the speed of a bullet coming out for different things. So, what's that? I know, oh, Lord. I want to sing a song. Oh, Lord. So we also have to worry about jammers. Again, jamming on the ground. This is happening every day, every hour, every second right now, specifically, Russia is doing this, where they're jamming GPS signals, they're jamming other things, they're jamming SATCOM, and they're not only affecting stuff in Ukraine, but they're affecting things all over Europe for what they're trying to do. So they do this. China has made the most advanced weapons for this that can go and try to jam every single satellite that we have for different objects of it. Again, they're trying to beat us for what they're doing. So again, you need somebody that can focus on, hey, we need to be able to defeat or deter jamming or do some other aspects. So the idea is, again, put a dedicated force into it. Other things are directed energy weapons, lasers, type stuff. Again, technology is there. Russia has a bunch of what's called low energy lasers that they can hit stuff at low Earth that they have deployed. And China is making massive powered lasers that they're doing and bringing it out and show to it that they could fire. It's so theoretically with a laser, like again, you don't know. Lasers aren't like movies where there's a red streak or anything like that. If you get shot with a laser, it'd be like me shining a flashlight on you. Right now, if I'm shining a laser, you don't even know that if I fired or not. All you know is if Bob all of a sudden falls out of his chair with a big gaping hole or something, then he got shot with a laser. You don't know, and you don't know. And in space, you can't just fly up there and take a picture of what's going on. So again, take out a satellite with a laser, very low attribution. It's hard to figure out what they're doing, and you can just shoot them down. So Russia, China are working on some that can go all the way out to GEO, which is a very, very powerful laser. That's massively powerful. I'm trying to bring those back. So the other thing is what's called direct-to-set ASATs for different threats. These are launched. These are actual missiles that just do a kinetic hit on different satellites. What this does is it flies up and then it strikes it and causes debris. It's like a big missile that goes up. It does a kinetic strike. It's moving so fast, it doesn't need an explosion because it's moving so fast to hit it. There are 4 countries to date who have launched and destroyed a satellite in space and tested it with the capability to do it. There's the United States, China, Russia, and India. India has done a destructive test. Now, the United States and India, when we did them what's called very low they did it very close to Earth, about 250 to 300 kilometers out. What that means is the debris that's caused will probably deteriorate within weeks typically, because the lower you are, as you get higher, which is what Russia, China did, especially China one, it's 800 kilometers, a little bit higher in that low Earth orbit. That debris will probably be there for a decade. So if there's a destructive test that goes out to that MEO, further out in orbits, if there's a piece there, that will live for infinity and beyond. So if you were to strike and blow up a satellite in space at that point in time, it spreads into a bunch of different pieces. That will be there indefinitely until we figure out some sort of technology to fly up and pick them up and clean it up. So by doing something like that, you're creating massive. We do have a lot more than everybody else. But there's a but in there. There's always a but. The United States has by far the most number of satellites that are broken down. Right now, it's about 10,000 satellites, somewhere around there, that we have going up. But about a large portion of those, 90-some%, are SpaceX. So SpaceX alone, it's not space, Starlink. Starlink has 9,500 satellites. So 9,500 satellites is what they have alone in their constellation that's in low Earth orbit. So that's closer to the Earth for what they have. But they have 9,500. So to put it in, when I started teaching for the Space Force, I started teaching there were about 2,000 satellites up. Now, this is 2019. Now, in 2026, end of 2025, they're again about 14,000. So about 7-fold increase just over in the 6 years over a number of satellites that are up there that are doing different aspects. So it's exploded, and it's going to go more and more. China, Russia actually has the second most. They have about 15. I mean, Russia has about 1,500, and China has about 1,300 satellites. But on the Russian one, most of their stuff is old. So when I say it's up there, it's not doing too well for a lot of it. China stuff is more advanced. Some of the stuff is more advanced than what we have for satellites. And they're doing a lot of the on orbit where they've done grapplers, they've done different things, and they've done test cases, and they're working on dogfighting type skills and all that kind of stuff for space and trying to do it. Because again, if you can hit us from a satellite type base, then you can. And then I threw up cyber because it's always an easy button thing, and I taught a lot of cyber stuff. But every effect that I do, from the lasers to all that kind of stuff, I could replicate for cyber. And cyber is fairly easy to do, and can mess with something. You can mess with a satellite, or you can mess with a ground station, all kinds of different things. So again, that's one reason they set up the Space Force, so they can have cyber parts of the Space Force that can actually then focus on the defense of those aspects and have a little bit more different things. Again, all they are in space are just satellites, or just computers in space. That's what they are. And they fail for different things, for different stuff. This is a slide deck that's hard to read, but I wanted to give you an understanding from a China-Russia perspective over different things they no kidding have. Again, in 2007 is when they did that launch and struck that target, and that debris is still there. That was launched in 2007, so that debris is still there. And it's actually breaking up and causing other debris and all those kind of things. So that it's always there, so you have to, the Space Force has to track all that debris, because if any piece of that debris were to actually strike a satellite, it would destroy that satellite, because it's moving that fast in what it's doing, just because of all that debris type aspects. So they've done that. They've also test cased one that would go out to 30,000 kilometers, which is all the way out to GEO. And if that happens, if something gets struck in GEO in that perspective out there, then again, that debris will be there infinity and beyond. It's just, there's nothing to go with it. So think of, normally when you take down a tank or whatever else, you go, crap, that sucks. But then you pick it back up and you move it off the road and you proceed on. Just think of all that litter from all that weapon sets you ever fired against stayed there and is at that location for the rest of your life. And move around. So again, Space Force is one of those things they have to do it. So they've actually grabbed a satellite out in GEO, which is the furthest one out. They've actually grabbed a satellite, dragged it to what we call a graveyard orbit. It's basically like taking your trash outside town. But it's to a higher orbit that we don't, that isn't really used. So they grabbed it and then dragged it out to there and then back in. Yep. Sorry, say that again. Oh, is there any sort of peace accord? The short answer is no. There is an outer space treaty that was signed in 1967, but really, all it really does is say that we're not going to put nuclear weapons in space. But there's, again, it's hard to focus on it. I mean, nuclear material has gone up because NASA will launch satellites to go further out with nuclear stuff. There's been satellites in the past that launch. So if a satellite is being powered by nuclear power, which is really rare and you typically don't do, but if it is, then that's basically having a nuke up in space, but it can get around that for different things. So the next time I talk about Russia, Russia has put up a suspected satellite that would carry a nuclear payload into it. And so they're looking at that. Again, who's going to enforce it? It's unenforceable per se for what it is, and you find out for different things. So they've also, again, China has built up, they have 10 different operational lasers to fire at different powers and different ranges. And then they're constantly tracking different satellites and at any given time. So if flying over, again, you could figure it out pretty quickly. And then advanced techniques for what they're doing. So China could actually, if they really wanted to, they could take out a lot of our satellites with just the technology that we have between cyber lasers and all that kind of stuff. I thought maybe you had a question.
Well, I kind of do.
You do? Okay.
Are we threatening them?
Are we threatening them? So this is that classic, I'm an American, and I'm a proud American. And nothing we do is offensive, and everything is doing to try to protect systems and making sure that everything else is okay. Yeah. So that's what I'll say is we do things from pure of heart and have no nefarious reasons that we would want to do those kind of things. But, I mean, again, one of the reasons to stand up the Space Force and Space Command is to figure out how do we deter. The biggest way to win a war is by deterring the adversary from actually entering into the conflict. And so if you build up enough deterrence into that, where they think that they won't win because of it, then that itself will make them not want to actually come and fight for different things. Russia, on the other hand, so the difference between China and Russia, China is way more advanced in their orbital capabilities as far as dogfighting. I say dogfighting again is relative, but because again, you're moving at multiples, you're moving so fast to go along with it, so you can't really maneuver around. You maneuver around differently. Think of a racetrack. You know, cars going around. If before it hit a turn, if that car is going as fast as it's good, and it had no brakes or anything else, it's just going to keep going straight because no brakes. It's going to keep flying and faster and faster. And it's going to break out to do it. So understanding a little bit of orbits and how that breaks out and how that fires helps you understand what a threat might be as it goes with it. But it's hard to track satellites in space. It's really hard to keep track of all 33,000 things in the catalog. And that's not even, again, there's other things in there too. Russia, whereas China did advanced dogfighting, they're mostly doing it on their own stuff. Russia likes to mess with us, the United States. So they do a lot of their dogfighting against, they have an on-orbit weapon system that they've launched 4 different versions of it over the last several years. And when they do, they always shadow and go up against an NRO satellite, typically. And they get real close and all that kind of stuff for different things. So again, if you think of a ship and a navy, how close can you get before it's a threat type stuff? If 2 tanks are getting, how close can you get before it's a threat for different aspects? So it's understanding those capabilities. The biggest fear is there's something called a Kessler effect, Kessler syndrome, that was published by a guy in the 70s. The idea is if one satellite strikes another satellite, that causes enough debris, that debris then hits another satellite, then that debris hits another satellite, and the next thing you know, it's kind of like a car crash, on a highway or freeway, where it becomes this big mess where all these cars are just hitting, and then it becomes uncontrollable type aspect. So you have to really do it. Yes, sir? Yes. Well, high-power microwaves, those kind of aspects, particle beams, those are things that the adversaries are working on. Right now, those are hard for right now. They're working on them. They have prototypes for a lot of that stuff. But right now, they don't have enough, they're not considered what we call operational to that much power. Because as a laser goes through the atmosphere, it has to be really advanced because it goes through and it hits a bunch of particles in the atmosphere and diffracts and deflects and does a bunch of stuff. So it takes a lot of talent to do it. But they are, yes, high-powered microwaves are being developed and can cause. And what that does is when it hits something, it goes in, when it hits it, it's sending so much energy towards something that it like fries the circuits, it fries everything else. So the satellite might be there in one piece, same thing with a laser, but it's dead because you fried the components in it, type aspects. On top of that, one thing, if you were to launch a nuke in space, so if you launched a nuke in space, let's say you did it in that low Earth orbit and you had it detonate, that would destroy pretty much every satellite in that low Earth orbit. And it would make it nearly impossible or hard to go through to get to the other orbits because you have to go through all that radiation in order to get to it. It would destroy every satellite if they were to do that in low Earth orbit. And not only that, but you can't, what we call reconstitute, you can't relaunch, put new satellites up because it's such a charged set of particles that way. So if you did it, if you try to launch a satellite afterwards, a week later you try to launch a satellite, it might last 3 minutes before all the radiation. And even a year later, if you were to try to relaunch a new satellite, it might only last for like a week. You can do some special hardening to make it last longer, but then it gets more expensive and all that kind of stuff. So a nuke in space is really, really bad, but our adversaries are still working on that because they know that if they're losing that conflict, if they were to do something like that, it hurts us the most for different concepts. So they do a lot of dogfighting. The Russians also worked on an air-launched direct-to-send ASAT. So they take an airplane. It's really pretty funny. They take an airplane. They have this big, huge rocket type thing underneath it, and they go vertical as fast as possible, and then they release it. And the idea is they could go into orbit and get into orbit, and then potentially strike something in orbit using that air launch type 1 too. Yeah, actually, the only person who's ever done it successfully is us, the United States. We did it in 1985, and then immediately shelved the program. The proof of concept, you know how that works. For different things. So a long time ago. And then, of course, Russia did it right before the war, right before they went in. They did a major cyber attack against Viasat. Viasat does wireless service from satellites, internet service and all that kind of stuff. The Ukrainians were using that commercial service for a lot of their command and control capabilities because it's communications. And the Russians launched it right one day before they actually went into Ukraine. They launched an attack and shut down over 4,000 different modems and different things throughout Ukraine so that those pieces were bricked, and so they had to use something else. That's why Starlink had to come in and help them out, because Russia destroyed cyber-wise. Yes, sir. Oh, yes. Massively, yes. Yes, sorry. He asked if we're still putting up a lot of satellites. Yeah, the other countries too. Yes, I mean China has exploded, and for what they've put up. Russia it hasn't exploded, but China has, and then of course every other country is trying to put up their own concept. I mean, I told you that Starlink has 9,500 satellites in low Earth orbit. The Chinese have already launched. They're developing something similar to that, where they want to put up over 6,000 satellites at the same time to go after it. So all these different satellites going up, like any other thing, you have to have the military there to proceed. I've gone way over my time. Is that okay? Okay, I'll do it. To go real fast. All right. So the Space Force, again, created in December 20th, 2019. So it's 2019. They carved out most of the people came out of the Air Force, but the other services ponied up people. But there are only 10,000 people that are Space Guardians, military Space Force. There's only 10,000 military members. There's about another 5,000. There's about another 5,000 civilians. So in total force, they have about 15,000 right now. Yeah. So way smaller than the Coast Guard, and 10 times smaller than the Marine Corps, if it gives you what it is. And what they did when they stood up the Space Force is they're still using the Air Force to take care of all the security stuff, everything else, all that kind of stuff. So anybody in the Space Force is either going to be like an engineer and acquisition person, an orbital ops, or an ops type person, a cyber person, computers, protect, or intel. So those are the only MOSs, AFSCs that they bring in with all the other kind of stuff because it's supposed to be lean and mean for what they do. Thought I saw something. So broken up and all that kind of stuff. The Air Force will say there's no such thing as a day without space. That's because every day, everything we interact with needs space, and it's protected by the Space Force type members for what we do on a different aspect. And we know that the military are going with it. So when the Space Force stood up, they stood up three major areas. One called STARCOM. All this means is it's a field command or functional command that does all the training and equipping. It does one that it's called Space Systems Command, or SSC, and that does all the launch, the R&D, the acquisition type things. And then they have their operational, which is called Combat Forces Command. So they broke it up into those three different areas. So operations, R&D, acquisition, and launch, and training and education. That's kind of how they broke it out. And then underneath it, they have what they call deltas. Deltas are wing equivalents, or led by O6s. In that sense, or brigade type equivalent. The only difference is it's brigade might have 5,000 people into it, whereas a delta might only have 800 people into it, because it depends on size. Aspect of protecting against missiles coming in. And then Space Command, that was started up in August in 2019. So it started in 2019 and went into, it became what's called initial operation. They stood up operations that they could sustain in 2023, so about 3 years later. So it's still fairly new, but it's another command just like anything else. So most people there are going to be all services that are broken down, and the commands are the ones that do the warfighting. So they're the ones that actually do the warfighting. The Space Force, just like any Army, everything else, does the training, equip type aspects of it. That's how they're broken down between the two. What's that? And they're responsible for everything 100 kilometers and above. That's basically, there's other things, but that's the basic rule. Just up in space to go along with it. And so then they have their, just like any other command, they have their service components in there. So they'll have space component, they'll have an Army component, just like any other command that does the warfighting. So it's set up the same type of way, even though some of those forces are still pretty small. So that, I mean, again, Space Force, training and equipping, 15,000 total people. Space Command, warfighting command, that actually does the will actually do the firing or shooting or authorization for it type aspects that are broken down. And if anybody here can stop a bullet from going, then go for it. So the next time you see a movie and they're saying that a satellite is hung over a spot, you go, no. As a matter of fact, when a satellite comes over, like in low Earth orbit, it's going to be over an area, like it'd be over Phoenix, for about, as the orbit goes around, for about 15 minutes window. And that's it. So it comes over 15 minutes. So if you need a worldwide, you have to have hundreds of satellites in different orbits that go around and do different things. So there is no parking a satellite.
Yeah, just gonna stay right here for a second. We here at Red Friday, as a group, would like to present to you. I'll give you that one. Come on over here. Turn this way.
Yeah, we pound them in.
So we always got to look at the camera. We'd like to present to you this certificate, or the Order of the Red, where we hereby recognize Russell Driesman, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, retired, for his honorable military service, veteran support initiatives, and support for the East Valley Red Friday Patriots. We'd like to give you that in appreciation from here. Thank you so much. We also would like to give you our kind of coveted lapel pin here for our Red Friday, and we hope that you wear it and keep us in mind and come back and see us again.
But by the way, whenever the military-wise, there's the old tradition that if when you're getting an award like this and it has prongs on it, then a lot of times they'll come by and say, "Good job, good job, good job."
This is the kinder, gentler presentation.
But thank you so very, very much. Thank you.
Russ, thanks a lot, Russ.
Over the last several weeks, we've announced the next Friday, February 13th, members of the Dutton family of entertainers will join us right here in this dining hall. And many of you know the Duttons perform in both Branson and in Mesa. They'll be joining us to promote their shows here in Mesa and in Branson, provide us a little background about their family and their support for their veteran community, and maybe, just maybe, we might get a vocal out of them. Regardless, I think you'll want to visit to plan to attend next Friday, the 13th of February. Also, next Friday, we will celebrate the 350th consecutive Friday meeting of the East Valley Red Friday Patriots Group. We hope you'll join us for that, nothing more than to just say that you were here. To our guests, we thank you for joining us today. We sincerely hope you'll return and share in our camaraderie and support our mission. Please know that you are always, always welcome at a Red Friday Assembly. And as a final reminder, let us not overlook our importance of our Red Friday mission to keep our deplored warfighters in our thoughts and our prayers and continue to demonstrate our support to those fine men and women. Thank you very much and have a wonderful weekend.